next panel explores the future of next-gen materials and is moderated by Brooke Roberts-Islam, Senior Contributor for Sustainability at Forbes. Brooke is a sustainability and technology journalist, author, and public speaker. As one of few specialists with career experience of both science and design, and having previously owned and operated a fashion knitwear brand, she uses her expertise to write about the new emerging sectors of circularity, sustainability, and material science, along with advances that will drive change within the fashion industry. Joining Brooke, we have Dr. Reiner Hengstmann, Vice President of Additional Materials at ESA Tantec, Alison Melville, GM of Product Innovation at Reformation, Tina Bhojwani, CEO and founder of AERA, and then I'll be staying on the panel as well.
Thank you so much, Nicole, and welcome to everyone. It's a really exciting opportunity to speak at this conference. There's been a huge buzz around this new emerging sector of next-gen materials, and I thought we could kick this panel off by going back to basics and just sharing a definition of what next-gen materials are. I've seen a tremendous number of comments throughout the sessions today asking for definitions and asking about the composites with polyurethane and other synthetics. So let's just remind ourselves of the MII definition, which is that next-gen materials are livestock-free, direct replacements for conventional animal-based leather, silk, fur, down, wool, and exotic skins. And these are replacements to what are referred to as incumbent materials, excuse me. Also on the list, though, are some MMCFs, some man-made cellulosic fibers, which are included as a replacement for silk. And I understand that as this sector emerges, it's possible that other nanocellulosic or other purely cellulose-based materials may come into that definition too. So to just discuss a few numbers before we get into the panel discussion about this next-gen materials sector, investment doubled in next-gen solutions from $425 million in 2020 to $980 million in 2021, so more than double. And MII estimates that the global wholesale market size for next-gen materials will be approximately $2.2 billion by 2026. There are 95 next-gen materials companies in the latest report by MII, and 55 of these have been founded since 2014. So to say this is a nascent field is probably an understatement. So before we jump in, I think it's worth considering how the materials and textiles industry functions now, today, and how these incumbent materials that next-gen materials might replace are made. Materials have typically been produced by manufacturers in isolation. So R&D is being conducted and materials are being pushed onto the market. This is an approach that's expensive and wasteful. That approach won't work for most next-gen materials. They're too complex, they cost too much to develop, and the varying material properties that they have are linked to specific performance characteristics. So it follows that as we talk about the future of next-gen materials, we're also talking about a new approach to stakeholder collaboration and to working not in isolation as material manufacturers, but in partnership in order to develop materials that are fit for purpose, but that are also fit for the particular products that they're going into. So I want to jump in now to the panel to discuss the factors that will influence the future of next-gen materials. And I'd like to go to Reiner first, actually. We've had quite a debate about this already prior to the panel, but I'd like to ask him to step in and maybe talk about what the mandate is for next-gen materials and how that steers his relationship with clients that buy these next-gen materials from his company.
Well, after having spent 2 nights now here in this conference, I'm here dialing in from Vietnam. I have learned a lot, and I had to think a lot. The thing is, the mandate for next-gen materials, I think we have to define the mandate yet, because we don't have a mandate, right? We just heard in the previous, as an example, in the previous panel, everybody has a different definition of sustainability. Look, we are not even clear here what is sustainability. We heard as well, the next-gen materials got to be better than leather, as an example. But what is better compared to what, right? I mean, there is a lot of unclarity, if I may say so, in the room. And we hear as well, look, we want to have this material basically immediately on the market, right? Because we want to use it. The journey of the next gen materials has started, the journey. And this journey, put it this way, using some terminology of the sport, I think it's a marathon. And we still have some miles to run, right? And, there's this African proverb, if you want to run fast, run alone, right?
Sorry to interrupt there, but just to give a little bit of context, it'd be great, I guess, for everyone to know about the materials that you develop. I know that the bios are available to all attendees, but just a quick summary of the work you do and the materials you produce.
Yeah, this was anyway my plan coming to this, Brooke.
Thank you.
I just wanted to finish this. I mean, this is really essential that, in order to define the mandate, we have to work together. So let me just explain a little bit to the audience who have not read my bio, who I am. So my name is Reiner Hengstmann. I'm the Vice President for Additional Materials for ISA Tantec. I will come to the terminology additional materials a little bit later. Just a brief background, I'm a chemist by education. I spent 17 years in the sporting goods industry as a global director for sustainability. So there's the brand side. I had my own business now in a production side. So there's quite some experience when it comes to demand, when it comes to possibilities, when it comes to ideas which, blow up into a big bubble and then explode. We have developed over the last 2 years with quite some investment, the material Hyphalite. Hyphalite is a plant-based material. I have now to use as well the terminology bio-based. But what we have done is, of course, while we developed the material, we have the proof. Of course, we had the material USDA certified. We are in the high 90%, approximately 96%. We're just waiting for the final confirmation in terms of bio-based. This material is as well performing to the requirements of the footwear industry. I think this was, the biggest challenge, and we heard it as well in the Congress. Now that, we can develop nice things, but as soon as it cracks or it doesn't withstand the abrasion test, just some example, it fails. So this was quite some experience, and now we are in the position to produce this material at a larger scale. So this is just an essence. We have a booth here as well, where you can get some more information about the Hyphalite.
Amazing. We'll continue to discuss this topic further with regards to the factors and the future for next-gen materials. I need to give the other panelists, so I'm sorry for the oversight, just a chance to introduce themselves as well. Alison, can you tell us a little bit about your background and the work that you're doing at Reformation?
Yeah. Absolutely. Hi, nice to see everyone. For those of you who have been in both days, this will be repetitive. I was on a lovely panel yesterday about the future of partnerships and bringing these materials to market. But for those of you who weren't, I'm the GM of product innovation at Reformation. Reformation is a sustainable fashion business. So our mission is to bring sustainable fashion to everyone. And we believe that you don't have to choose between the earth and a dress, and that's kind of what we're aiming to deliver to our customers. So my role is, how do we bring innovative technologies and new categories into the brand with really kind of breakthrough next level sustainability promises.
Mm-hmm. Great, thank you. And Tina, you've had a journey through the industry to the point now where you're running your own business. Talk us through your background and what you're doing now.
Absolutely. It's so great to be here. So thanks for having me on the panel. I have spent my entire career in the fashion industry and working for large companies and sort of seeing and not really seeing what happens along the way. And a few years ago, I decided that I wanted to figure out a way to do better by an industry that I love, and to create a business that can show that style and quality and design doesn't have to be compromised in the name of sustainability, because I think that's a big sort of issue that we face today. So if we could produce a product, my company is luxury footwear that's handmade in Italy, with sustainable materials. And the idea is to create a product that looks as good as, has the same durability as, and makes a statement when it comes to sustainability as the second part of it. Not, we don't lead with that, but create great shoes that people like, and then the bonuses that we're vegan and we're B Corp certified and all the rest. And then maybe we can help shift people's perceptions. So that's my company, AERA, and we're just over a couple years old now.
Great. And Nicole, was there anything that you'd like to add as well I know that you've been speaking a lot, but
I have.
to this conversation.
Yeah, the only thing I would say that I think helps with our perspective on the future of next gen materials is we are at the center of the ecosystem. So we do work with scientists, we work with investors, we work with entrepreneurs, we work with material companies, we work with brands and attorneys, right? And so the idea is to really understand the challenges facing the entire industry, the perspectives from each audience, and how we can take all of those learnings, bring everyone together, and quickly address the challenges facing the whole industry.
And I guess that's how you knew that a conference like this was so necessary, right? The industry and all the stakeholders needed to be convened.
Yeah, and I think that's what everyone's really appreciating, because you can also hear other perspectives. Like we've been talking a little bit, and I think 2 panels ago, about how it's a challenge, for brands or consumers who don't understand the full PU content of the materials, which is very true. But then on the other hand, it's helpful to look at it from the perspective of the material companies themselves and the investors who are also involved. So I'm really hoping that this industry helps everyone understand each other a little better, or this conference helps everyone understand each other better.
Yeah, no doubt. And actually, you've touched on something there, Nicole, that's really critical, and that's the sort of level of understanding of what the materials that are being produced are and the purposes they're being used for, and what that means to a brand and to a consumer. And Tina and Alison, you've both mentioned quality, design, the sort of leading characteristics of products, and serving consumer markets that are changing rapidly. But Reiner, you're developing materials behind the scenes and trying to fulfill these new, appetites, this sort of changing understanding of what next gen materials could be. How do you work with brands? What is the stakeholder relationship right now? And what does it need to be to sort of optimize next gen materials?
Well, I would say the optimum would be to engage the stakeholders here, the brands, from the very beginning. Right? Of course, there is an idea, and we want to, make this idea happen. What can we do? This would be the optimal, right? But in many cases, this is not happening. We learned as well, you have many startups which are coming up with ideas. And then there is the big roadblock, I would say, where now then requirements are coming. Requirements from customers, here, for example, brands. Like, well, material is amazing, but I would like to have this and this performance, plus it has to look nice, plus, right? Quite some requirements. Again, though we are still at the beginning, right? Rome has not been built within one day. It takes some time, right? And coming back to the marathon. So, but those how to say this, those experiences, those bad experiences, which might even throw them back, could be avoided. Really, if you start at the very beginning, yeah, and say, look, this is what we want to have, this is what it should achieve, this is what it might look like, and even if it's not, let's say, super shiny, we need to consider, because this terminology has been mentioned many times, it's plant-based, right? We are still having, the paper, we are working with a natural product. Nature is super perfect, there's no question, but having a bag, for example, and you might see some unevenness on the surface due to the nature inside. I think this should not be a roadblock to stop a natural product. So, in essence, partnership, transparency, working together.
But this is also about expectation. And what we're talking about is a historic industry where things were produced in a very homogenized and industrial way. And now with next-gen materials, there's an element of biology, of science, of biochemistry that is perhaps not as finely tuned as the old incumbent methods. So I guess on the brand side, it's difficult, because if you're used to a certain way of working and have a certain expectation, then you uphold that for your customer. But if, Reiner, you're on your side of the equation and you're having to work with the nitty gritty and the limitations that are science-based, then you have a different set of expectations. Alison, can you talk to me about this? Because I know that you're already working with some of these materials, and no doubt you've been on this journey already. So how have you worked with next-gen materials manufacturers? What sort of relationships do you have? What works, what doesn't?
Yeah, and we thought, I think exactly what Reiner was talking about. We discussed yesterday in the panel about partnerships and the importance of partnerships in getting next-gen materials off the ground, right? Understanding those requirements from the beginning, having it be an iterative design process, understanding the requirements up front is kind of how, the best runway you can get to getting the material to market. When we think about materials, we think about a portfolio approach, right? So some of these partnerships may take years to actually deploy, and the nature of those relationships with those partners will be different than the nature of the relationships we have with, say, like a plant-based material that's commercially available today that we can, buy off the shelf, as it were. So I think the relationships are different based on the stage of maturity of the material and how pre-market or mature it is. I think one thing I will say is that these further out materials, materials that are further from market, really will involve some kind of business model innovation as well as the technological innovation. So, we don't just, we understand that technological innovation isn't the end of it. It's that there has to be innovation on the business model front to incorporate the technological innovation into our supply chain, into our value proposition, all of that, right? So it's not all of the onus is on the material providers, it's on brands as well to update our business models and ways of working.
And so does that involve you signing industrial partnerships, entering into joint ventures? Are you putting that much skin in this?
Yeah, so we recently this week, I think it's been announced in a few publications this week that we are now working with Ecovative, and that's a long-term investment, right? Like that is not commercially available today, but we are working on it with the understanding that that's the direction we want things to go. And in the meanwhile, we have other partners, right? So we don't believe that one solution is going to solve the entire industry's problem. And in fact, we want a lot of players in the room, and there are a lot of variety of needs. So we really do believe in the portfolio.
And before I come to you, Tina, because I'd like to ask you as well your way of working with next-gen materials or exploring the landscape, I just want to check in with Reiner. Have you or your company entered into any industrial partnerships or joint ventures of any kind to sort of share that R&D journey or develop material specifically for a customer?
No, This has been solely developed by us, born
Mhm.
out of an idea. And I mean, you have to understand. I think it was not absolutely clear. We are a leather company. We are a leather company with production in China and Vietnam as well in the US, right? And this material we have, the Hyphalite, within this Congress, alternatives have been used. We don't see this as an alternative, right? But we see this as an additional material to our already more sustainable produced leather, an additional material, but an alternative to plastic. This is the way we, want to move forward.
Mhm.
And aiming not only aiming, it was quite hard work, but at 96% of bio-based content.
Mhm. And Tina, so maybe talk us through your relationships with any next-gen materials manufacturers and the kind of partnerships you're establishing or looking to establish.
Absolutely. So our shoes, as I mentioned, are made in Italy, and we were really looking to source materials locally. And thankfully, there is an amazing company outside of Milan that's been pioneering vegan materials since the 1960s. And it was really interesting to meet with them pre-launch as we were developing the concept and understanding how much of what they're doing is pure synthetics, how much of it is bio-based, how can we get the best possible materials, how can we develop together. So we sort of formed this partnership very early on with our main supplier, and that's been extremely helpful. On the business side, on the manufacturing side, it was very challenging because we were sort of early to market or the first to actually approach factories and say, we'd like to use these materials to make footwear. And, this is the quality we want, and these are the styles. And at first they thought we were crazy and why would you want to do this? And then we explained it better. And then it was frustrating because it took twice as long. So these new and innovative materials are harder to manufacture with, if you want to make something artisanally. And slowly but surely, it got easier, and what took, 1.5 times as long is now 1 to 1. But I feel like it's constant partnership. It's explaining what you want to do, why you want to do it. It's working with material suppliers, and it's a perpetual evolution. Like, we started out, and I was very naive. It's like, we've got to make this bio-based shoe, and today it's just impossible. There is no material you can make a pair of shoes with if you want to have the quality, the comfort, the look, and the feel, the longevity. So our shoes today are 50-50. And so, I think it's going to be, as new materials come to market, we're going to have to test and partner with the materials companies and see what it is and isn't possible, and even maybe help on the other side to come up with some better alternatives.
I think what you've said there, Tina, sort of almost reminds us of that overarching question, which is, what is the mandate of next-gen materials? Why pursue that more difficult path? What is it that you're looking for? Why do that? Because as you rightly said, and as Reiner's pointed out, leather is a perfectly great material. I know that there are issues around it, but why insist on next-gen materials?
Well, we started a business that really wanted, the focus is, human, environmental, and animal welfare. So really looking at, can we produce without harm to animals? That was one part of it. And the other part of it was really like, how can we look at materials that have less of an impact? And even the synthetic materials we're using today have less than 1/3, and we've scientifically measured it and done life cycle assessments, have less than 1/3 of an impact on the environment. So, even if the concern isn't the animal welfare, if you just look at the environment, I think we've got to think differently about the materials we choose. And it's not only about what is the best material, but what is best for, our shared planet, what is best for the future, and if we can avoid using animals, why not?
So it's a story about ethics, about a certain philosophy over safeguarding animals, and it's about the environmental impacts. But Alison, what about for Reformation? I mean, that it's no secret the opportunity, for example, that's in the vegan market and the appetite for vegan products, whether or not they contain plastic, sometimes that's not even a concern for the consumer. Why is Reformation staking so much on next gen materials?
Yeah, I think going back to the fundamental issue, which is like we have a climate crisis, right? We're crossing planetary boundaries across a variety of fronts. The planet can't sustain the traditional means of kind of extraction and consumption that we've had today. So how are we really going to get back in line with what our planet can sustain? That's our approach. We offer, just to be transparent, we offer both today. So we offer leather footwear, and we also launched a leather alternative, which we're calling cereal leather, which is very low percentage virgin petroleum contents in our footwear collection. I will say I don't think we can follow the customer on vegan appetite. I think there's a lot of talk about it. I think we have to lead. I don't necessarily think that given the same product in a leather and a leather alternative or a non-leather option, the customer will go straight to the alternative. So I do think that there's a lot of education that has to get done, a lot of positioning, marketing around it. It's not something where we can be followers. We truly have to lead the conversation.
Mm-hmm. And Reiner, coming back to you, because you can really share a viewpoint on, in this particular instance, leather versus additional materials. What kind of difference in interest levels or inquiries or appetite are you seeing for next gen materials? And also, if you could give us an idea of any roadblocks to the advancement of the additional materials you're developing as this market grows.
Look, sorry, my chair is slowly going down the later the night. The thing is that every material has its limitations. And even the next gen materials, they do have their limitations, whether it comes especially to physical performances, whether it's water resistance, for example, or abrasion. The roadblocks I see is, or put it this way, which can be avoided from the very beginning if we, coming back to the mandate, Brooke, you said, if we are very clear at the beginning, what are the expectations? Mm-hmm. Can next gen materials really completely eliminate or to be used as and now I'm using the word alternative for leather? The future will show this. Again, we are at the beginning, right? We are at the beginning of the development. We heard yesterday quite interesting quotes. There's nothing in a caterpillar that tell us it's going to be a butterfly. We will see if the butterfly develops. But one thing Buckminster Fuller as well said, we are called to be the architects of the future, not the victims. Mm-hmm. So coming back to the architects, right? When we design something and we design a house, we don't start with a rooftop, we start with a base and then build stone on stone and stone, and we'll see where the path will lead us in terms of next gen materials. They definitely have their stand, no question. Otherwise, we would not have to have made this material, and there are amazing materials out. So the future will show how to overcome those roadblocks, mm-hmm. and which additional roadblocks we still might face. I don't know yet.
Okay, Alison, something that I'd like to follow up on from what Reiner's just said is this concept that one of the driving forces for next gen materials is that they're lower impact. As ill-defined as that is, but just that they do less harm than incumbents. If the materials that you're working with at the moment, these next gen materials, do prove to meet your new climate remit and your impact reduction remit as a company, do you foresee that they'll replace all of the incumbent materials? Will you get rid of animal leather?
I think I would almost love Nicole's view on this from an industry perspective, right? Because I think that there's this kind of industry-wide change takes time. Like, I think we're talking about a decade from now. I think it's really hard as a company, or decades. I mean, you tell me, Nicole, like I think it's one of these things where it is really hard for us to make a statement that's that forward looking. If the entire industry changes and everybody in the world stops and changes their behavior to something else, then maybe this all happens, quicker than we're thinking. But Nicole, I would love to kind of swing it to you about what you've seen in markets that are in similar situations.
Just before we do, Nicole, I just want to ask one more follow-up before we get Nicole's input on this. Presumably with Ecovative, for example, you're working with a material that you've already determined to have better credentials than other materials you're using. So is it not?
I mean, yeah, that's the vision. It's pre-market, right? So it's not like we have a product to send to you today to try on. We are in a long, year over year partnership to bring something to market. So I think the crux of this is, you have to live in the gray space until things are commercially viable. And there is so much gray space right now, as things are starting to come online and go to market that are truly benign, or like the new definition of benign. So I would say it's, using that as an example, we're just not there yet in terms of the commercial application, but we are invested in trying to get there.
Nicole, your thoughts?
Well, I would say number one, I think that we have to be paying attention to animal agriculture in general because of climate change. So I don't think this is something that we can ignore. And there's a lot of people who are working on it. So in order to save the planet and reduce our greenhouse gas emissions, like we have to be looking specifically at cow production as well. It's one of the largest contributors to greenhouse gas emissions on the planet. And then second, I actually learned a lot in the disruption panel yesterday. I thought what Jamie from Rethink X said was really interesting, which is on average, right, that once a product is on the market, and that does mean, you can buy it, it can take about 15 years for it to disrupt the entire industry. And so I would say even right now, we may not even be at year one for the next gen materials being on the market. I mean, I wouldn't even say that necessarily with leather, and definitely not with the other materials. And so it is going to take time, and a decade, like you're saying, Alison, 15 years, maybe 2, to disrupt the whole industry. I know me personally saying that, I wish things could happen quicker. But what I think we've seen through this entire conference is this innovation takes time, that there's a lot we're demanding from these materials. They have to be more sustainable, right? At least for us, we really want them to be animal free. And that does seem to be a theme. And we'll hear that in the consumer research panel later today, that consumers are demanding that too. But then we want the aesthetic. We want all of this performance. We want the low price to be at price parity with at least animal leather. And when you have synthetic leather being so much cheaper, that is a factor that brands have to consider, and then scale. Most brands' complaints when we talk to brands is they aren't available, and the material companies aren't even responding to their inquiries because they're already overwhelmed with demand. And so there's a lot of pressure we're putting on these material companies, and I really think we need to support them. And that's what we've been talking about through this whole conference. And if we do, and if we can band together, then maybe we really can solve these issues.
So talk to us a little bit, Nicole, about capacity, because we've seen through the statistics in the MII report that more than half of the next gen companies in existence today are only 8 years old. So, clearly there's an opportunity here. But what, for example, with, let's call them alternative leathers, does MII have any handle on the current capacity? I mean, many innovations are still in pilot phase, and so how much of these materials are available in relation to the demand that there is for them?
I mean, that's an excellent question, and I can talk to the team and see if there's any way we could potentially do some analysis on that. We have not so far, only because it's very clear to us, and I think everybody else who has some knowledge of the space, that demand far exceeds the supply. That there really is not nearly enough of any of these next-gen materials, and even beyond our own definition of them, that we need significantly more resources in not only companies creating these materials, money in the R&D, scientists working in this space. A lot of these companies are trying to hire material scientists, engineers, chemists, and having trouble because there's just not enough expertise in the industry. And so there's a lot of work we need to do on that supply side before I think we even get to the point where it's important to know the differential in the demand we're not meeting.
So really a part of the future challenges of this segment is a very real infrastructural expertise and I guess capacity limitation before we even begin to talk about how they might compete with incumbent materials on the kind of impact side of things. And Tina, I'd like to come to you next and ask about your ambitions around adopting more next-gen materials beyond what your current manufacturer can supply. Have you done any sort of investigation into working with any of the other alternative leathers independent of your existing supply chain?
Yes, we've been looking into, you know, more bio-based materials and mycelium materials for over 2 years now. And, you know, to repeat a little bit what Nicole said, like, you know, we wanted to work with the mycelium material, and it hadn't come to market and was very limited in supply, and it would cost more than a real crocodile. So I think from a scalability perspective, it was impossible, you know, affordability, scalability, and now the company we were speaking to has gone on to do a big partnership and raise money. So there's hopes for that. But, you know, I see this as a constant evolution, and as better solutions come to market, our company wants to do even better. You know, sort of, we wanted to start because I think you've got to start and you know, and show what's possible, and then evolve as better materials come to market. At least that's our philosophy. So yes, we're 50-50 now, and the goal is to change that ratio. But footwear is also a very challenging category, especially what we're trying to do, which is luxury footwear. So a lot of the materials we've researched aren't strong enough, durable enough, give you the end results. And, you know, what I've learned a lot is that the customer doesn't really want to compromise, is not willing to do that. They want to do better, but without compromising. So, you know, we'll evolve as we can, and that's certainly the mission.
Well, so there are some roadblocks there and some limitations in the abilities of the materials in terms of the end use that you have for them. Alison, is that something you've come up against as well at Reformation?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that when we talk about like what is the mandate for next gen materials, it really is to build out the entire breadth of the offer of what traditional materials can and do today, right? So there's a variety of price points, there's a variety of aesthetics, there's a variety of performance characteristics. Like the next gen market can't just be one option. It has to actually be all of those options to fill all of the needs. So I think the biggest roadblock is you may find one material that's good for this one application and this one product. But to Tina's point, you know, footwear manufacturing, there's so many different, you know, your lining material is different than your upper material. Like to solve the equation requires such a proliferation of development types that, you know, there's no silver bullet. There's no one material that's going to fix it all.
And Reiner, tell us about your development process around this. And if you're developing these materials, how do you approach that? How do you manage performance within the material?
Well, as I said at the beginning, we are a leather company, so you most likely can imagine we have labs in our factory. And as we, you know, coming back to what the expectation of next gen materials, we don't have really standards there. So we just said, okay, let's compare this with leather because these are the demands of customers. And Alison, you're right. There is not one there is not one size which fits all. I mean, this is of course what we experience, right? You cannot. I mean, this material or in this thickness might be used here, but in this thickness you cannot use it there, etc., etc. So, but nevertheless, so due to not existing standards, we decided let's look into the leather standards for the certain thickness, and then we were working towards these standards, right? And at the end of the day, the material which is available now serves these requirements, but it was, a long way to gather data, and this is what I just wanted to mention, or at least to add to the previous discussion. This is as well imperative that we get more data about this next gen materials, and if we then compare one material with the other material, I mean, we have to make sure that we as well using here same methodologies,
Yes.
right, and not comparing apples and bananas, which
Mhm.
as well makes us turning in circles instead of moving forward.
And what's the process around that? Are you talking about wearer trials, working in partnership with certain product output?
Yes, of course. I mean, of course, we want to sell the product, so therefore you have to offer this product to brands, which we did, and we just accomplished, not we, but basically a brand just accomplished almost a half-year wear test of with this material, and it sort of passed. So we are looking forward to the next steps. But there were quite some wear tests done, and we experienced here as well roadblocks saying, well, no, it's not what we think it could be. But here as well, please understand, we are at the beginning, and we still we do see this as a continuous improvement. Of course, these feedbacks are utmost important, right, to architect, to design it in a different way, move forward, and I'm sure we will come there. And that's why our department is called COSM, Creation of Sustainable Materials. It's the plural. So I hope more exciting things to come.
Can you tell me any surprises that the trials threw up regarding performance, or is that a little too early and proprietary?
Surprises? No. Well, one surprise is now that there is one test which is called the so-called VEMFlex, right? Where you put a little piece of fabric or material, whatever is in a machine, which is then cycling up to, well, 1 million times, or even more if you want. But you have certain requirements. And of course, there were surprises saying, oh my God, it started cracking immediately. I think everybody experienced this. But as well, now we are at a stage where we're saying surprisingly good. So meaning we have reached, for example, the requirement of 500,000 VEMFlex with this material. So this is quite surprising. Beside other physical tests, it's really quite surprising, and we are happy about this. But again, there are still some issues where we can say we can adjust the screw here a little bit more and there a little bit more. But here again, it takes time. I think, I'm convinced we get there, right? And of course, feedback is required. But we have produced, not we have asked to produce shoes. They look good. You might see them as well, or you have seen this already. In the Congress, this was the green shoe this morning. So, I mean, it looks good, and it works, and it fulfills requirements so far.
Could you just add as well the time frame between the original
idea
and tracking and reaching the level that you're at now with the performance of the material?
You mean the immediate? Well, this goes into months. Months. Yeah, this is not a thing you can solve overnight. This is because you have to think what went in, what can be adjusted, what can be changed. Not losing the concept, right, of being next gen or bio-based, right? Not adding anything just in order to make it perform. Of course, this is possible, but this wasn't the idea. And I said we started a couple of years back, so it's a journey, more than 2 years already, a quite intense journey.
We've got a comment that's come up here. I thought that he would say years. I did too. I was ready for 2-3 years, Reiner. So I think we're all a bit stunned.
No. I mean, from one crack to the other. I mean, then we would still no. Definitely months. Definitely months. You know, we have this department really focusing on this. It is a lot. It's a lot of work, as you can imagine. And of course, we don't make huge batches just in order to adjust a problem.
Yeah.
But it took a lot of effort.
Wow. I guess not compromising and remaining at that high 90s% of bio-based is, you know, I guess throwing a lot of PU into the mix might solve your problems quite quickly, but your mandate is different.
Exactly. This was not the idea. The idea. Plus, on the other side, we heard this as well. If you offer material and say, well, look, it looks nice and it smells nice and the shoe looks nice, but 50,000 and it cracks, the brands say, thank you very much for the offer. We might consider next year when you come back. Yeah. So therefore, right, then better focus on this, do the right job. And when I say months, I'm not talking about 2 months, right? It takes really months to really adjust one parameter after the other parameter.
Yeah, in isolation. Yeah, absolutely. And we're into our Q&A part of the panel, and we have a question that's come in from Tiffany Hua, which is regarding performance. What was key for performance? I assume innovations in binders and green chemistries. Seems like a need here for green additives and binders that enhance flexibility and strength. That seems like a logical interpretation, but Reiner, could you add to that?
I mean, yes, green chemistry, binders. We have a natural binder within the product, which fulfills the requirements. Can you please get the question again on the panel, because
sure, yeah.
There is one issue definitely in the industry. It's not in the manufacturing industry, but I would say it's in the chemical industry, because we learned as well, and just mentioned, you cannot achieve 100%, absolutely 100% performance with 100% bio-based or 100% material out of the nature. There has to be some adjustment. That's why we are saying we have 96%. Yeah, and there is something you have to add. Most likely, we will, over time get there, and we will get better. But here, this is as well a question to the chemical industry, saying, look, we need support here, coming back to stakeholders, because we see them as well as a stakeholder. We need them as well on the table. And what can be done in terms of, getting the right chemical substance, which can serve the purpose, right? And help the industry. I mean, this is the biggest cry within the next gen material society, if I may say so. To move away, we heard it from polyurethane, but what are the alternatives? Yeah, PU or acrylics, or just to name a few polymers.
Yeah.
But here again, we need the support from the stakeholders.
Absolutely. I'll just come back to the comments here. Tiffany agrees and is thankful for that response, Reiner. Thank you very much for the question.
You're welcome, Tiffany.
Alison, we haven't got any other questions coming through just yet, but I just wanted to come across to you and just ask about this performance side of things and how you're working with Ecovative or similar companies, and whether you're getting involved in that aspect where synthetic polymers are being replaced by higher percentages of bio-based materials, and how you can help, I guess, leverage your role as a brand to perhaps instigate more investigation in these greener chemistries.
Yeah, absolutely. So I would say our role really comes in as soon as we have sample yardage, sample material to work with, right? So we're really in there doing, because yeah, as Reiner mentioned, they're at the material phase, there are certain tests that you can run in the lab, but then we're also running performance tests on the footwear samples after they're manufactured. And sometimes you don't, like we've had an example, not with any of our current partners, but with previous partners that we've explored, of even finding the right chemistry match between our glue supplier and the surface texture or the surface coating of a material we were working with, right? So I think, yes, materials is phase one. We really come in terms of R&D, testing, lab, all of that stuff once we get to sample phase. And there are just a variety of elements, right? They go into shoemaking, it gets hot, it gets cold. Like, how does the material perform under those conditions? So it's quite involved from a sampling phase, and word to the wise for people that are starting to incorporate these into their lines. It does take a disproportionate amount of time and effort, because these are not materials that your factories are used to working with. It's also not materials that your suppliers of your factories are used to having their materials need to intersect with appropriately.
Mm-hmm. Could you give us a little bit of a yardstick, Alison, in terms of product development for this type of product versus the traditionally made from incumbent materials?
I mean, sometimes they just, that was an example where it took 10 months to go. And it was, I think there was a supply issue there as well, right? Where there were dwell times between getting new batches of materials to do new prototypes with. So it's not just the speed at which, like, how fast can we run another sample to the lab? It's like, okay, we have to go back to the drawing board. We have to change the contents of the coating. Okay, let's call the glue supplier. Like, there are a lot of steps in between just running the next batch of prototypes. So I think that one was maybe 8 to 10 months.
And I guess that's the difference between this new approach and the old approach, which is where you just launch a sample through the existing supply chain and just ask for it as quickly as possible. So weeks.
Yeah. It's time and labor intensive if you really want to get something new and innovative in the pipeline.
We haven't had another question come in. Thomasine Dolan has asked, can Reiner show a sample of Hyperlight, please?
Yeah, my colleague just reminded me via WhatsApp as well. Apologies, I'm sitting at home here at 4 a.m. in the morning. Happy to do this, really happy to do this. If you just approach me, we can arrange something. We can arrange a video chat where I'm happy to introduce even more about the material. So please approach me or approach us. I think my email address is, I think, elsewhere, definitely within the package. Yeah, but unfortunately, I don't have any material here at home. Sorry.
And while we've still got a little bit of time, Tina, I just wanted to come to you just on the subject of testing and developing materials. We've had a comment come through. Tina, have you reached out to any of the innovators in this conference? And Nicole's chimed in there and given a bit of info about some of the testing that Tina's done. But if you could just shed any light on some tests you've done that may avoid other listeners repeating those tests or help them to sort of expedite their development process. Oh, you're on mute, Tina. We may have lost you, Tina. I think it's frozen. Oh, great.
Am I back? Okay. Sorry, my computer's actually. I'm fairly new to the material conference, and so we've had.
Tina, you need to close down the tab that you have open of the stage because it's causing an echo.
Am I okay now?
Oh yes, we've got you back. Yes.
Sorry, I'm so sorry.
That's
but
okay.
no, I'm pleased to be a part of the Material Innovation Conference and the initiative, because for us, we are starting to evolve materials, and so just having access to different materials companies is very important. But we've been just evolving with our main partners so far. So I'm hoping that we can find new solutions and share those stories as we continue to grow, and also as we find new and innovative things in the market, bring them to everyone who's a part of this initiative as well.
I think you're in the right place, Tina.
Absolutely. I couldn't be happier to be a part of it. And this is the reason why I created the company, to do things in a meaningful way. So absolutely.
And we've just got a minute to go, and I think maybe we can hand over to you, Nicole, just for any final thoughts or words or additions to the discussion we've had.
I don't know. For me, I'm so encouraged of how much I think two things that everybody in the whole conference is really pushing for improvement and not accepting where we are right now, right? That I think everyone really does understand that we need to take some massive change quickly, but also being understanding of each other and knowing that, this does take time. And like Alison, you said, I liked how you said how companies are going to need to rethink their business models, that before it really was just, okay, I want this product, I'm going to find a sourcing agent and go buy it. And I want it, here in this amount of time and this volume at this price. Whereas if you're going to work with these new materials, that has to change. And a lot of brands are making these investments in the next gen material companies, not only financial investments or, pre-orders to get the guaranteed material when it's ready, but also that testing, like Alison mentioned.
Yeah, there's evidence in this panel that the business is changing. It's not just the materials, but it's the business around it and the manner with which business is conducted. Any final thoughts from you, Alison, and then we'll come to you, Reiner.
I think we're only going to get there together, right? And so I'm so glad that there's a proliferation of voices and a proliferation of options out there, right? And I think there's like a beauty in the variety of approaches too, because we're going to need a variety of results.
And Reiner, I guess we have maybe a few seconds left.
Yeah. I don't really. I only need a few seconds. I think I mentioned already we have a virtual booth. So the ones who are interested in the material, you will see an interview of our executive chairman, Thomas Schneider. In the background, you see Hyperlight samples. Well, small, but at least you see samples. Plus, he is very nervously shaking a shoe from left to right. So here, this shoe is as well made out of Hyperlight.
So Tina, it sounds like that's where you'll be heading after this call.
Absolutely.
Thank you all to the fantastic panelists, Tina Bhojwani, Alison Melville, Reiner Hengstmann, and also, of course, for Nicole Rawling, for bringing us all here for this fantastic conference.
Yes, no, thank you so much, Brooke. And I'm going to get Brooke's article again. I know we're getting into the sustainability panel soon, but she has a really great article talking about sustainability that came out, might have been last week. And so right now we actually have our second speed networking session of the day. Again, this is a chance to connect one-on-one with some of the other attendees. During the speed networking, attendees are automatically matched based on interest. To access speed networking, please click on the networking button on the left-hand side of the screen. And in this networking room, you'll see a list of recommended connections. So if you prefer just to use the time to meet one-on-one, please do that, or you can have the automatic connection. All right, see you back soon.